Okay, so what does the audience think? Do you know what the audience thinks? Well, that's the question we set out to answer. How well do the people who program the content towards the audience of country listeners actually know what those listeners are thinking? It turns out the answer is not as much as we think. And I'm going to share that with you as we go through here. Now, what we did was 2 studies, and they were essentially identical. We did one study that was among you, the country program director, and another study that was among people who listen to the format, who listen to the radio format. And we asked the same questions. We asked the listeners what their attitudes are about the things they hear on country radio. We asked the programmers to predict what the listeners would say. That's what this study is about. How well or poorly did you predict what the audience would say? Some of the answers, I think, are going to surprise you and make a lasting impression on you. All right, here's the methodology. I just want you to know this so that we can get it out of the way quickly. We had 800 listeners in the sample, 18 to 54-year-old men and women. Everyone was a country radio listener. I'll give you what that question was in just a moment. 60% women. National probability study, so it was representative. All random responses were mopped-in, compensated online sources, so it was a random online study. Survey length around 15 minutes, and we did it late last year. Here's the PD side. 152 of you participated in this study. All country PDs, 100% online, about 10 minutes, and the interviewing dates were very similar. Okay? Let me give you an idea of what came out of this. First of all, let me start by defining terms. What is a country radio listener? This is the question we asked that allowed people into the study. Think of country music artists like Blake Shelton, Carrie Underwood, Kenny Chesney, Casey Musgraves, and Dan and Shay. Do you currently listen to an FM radio station on air or online for country music for 30 minutes or more in an average week? Yes or no? Pretty clear, right? Everyone in this study said yes to that question. Everyone in this study. 40% of those people said that kind of station was their favorite. Another 40% said they listen often, but it's not their favorite. That adds up to 80% of the listener study who said a country radio station was either their favorite station or one they listen to often. That's a huge, huge, rich population of country fans. Here's how the demographics broke out, quite representative and broad. Here's how the gender was specified. We specified this going in to be 60% female. And here's how the geography worked out. Again, a broad cross-section across America. A good-looking study. Now, what about the program directors? Here's how the program director participation varied by market. All in all, you can see that about 50% came from the top 100 and about a third from the top 50. So again, a very good cross-section of participation from PDs. Doesn't apply means they might be responsible for multiple markets. They might be with Spotify, Pandora, etc. Now, this first question I'm going to give you is one of the most important outcomes of this survey, period. And it's a question whose answer, I believe, has a lot to do not just with country radio, but with radio in general. And as far as I know, nobody's asked this question before. And the question was like incredibly simple. When you think of the radio, which of the following do you mean? The numbers you're looking at are the PDs answering their predictions of what the listeners would say. When you think of the radio, which of the following do you mean? An AM or FM station on a regular radio or car radio? An AM or FM station streaming? Podcast? What you hear on TuneIn, iHeart? Sirius XM, Spotify, Pandora, Apple? Any kind of music you can get on your mobile device, etc., right? The PDs say, the listeners are going to say that when they think of the radio, what they think of is what you get on a regular radio, car radio, maybe what you get streaming. Here's what the listeners say. The most important thing I want you to pay attention to, whoops, I'm on both sides, that makes it more complicated, is the third from the bottom. Spotify, Pandora, Apple Music, or Amazon Music. Look at the red bar. Look at all the red bars. The number one red bar is AM or FM station on a regular radio. The number two bar is tied between an AM or FM streaming station and Spotify, Pandora, Apple Music, or Amazon Music. What that means is, when you think of the radio, you are as likely to think of Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, Apple Music, as you are of a radio station streaming online. When you think of the radio. Think about the consequence of that for a second. Not only that, but look at podcasts is even a little bit higher than what radio would predict. Really, really important. What that implies is that to the average listener, and remember the average listener is 18 to 54, country fans, Spotify, Pandora, Apple Music, Amazon Music, yeah, that's radio. Remember how we used to say, well, there's radio, and then there's these digital service, these playlist services, right? Guess what? Those are radio too. That's new. This picture is a little complicated. Let me break it down for you. Those are the same items on the left. Those are demographics across the top. Those are percentages in the cells. They're red up and down. Green is high and red is low. The thing I want to point your attention to is this block right here. This means that if you're a 20-year-old, 52% of you say Spotify, Pandora, Apple Music, Amazon, yeah, that's radio. A percentage that's almost double the number who say radio means a radio station streaming online. 52 versus 30. 30-year-olds, 48 versus 46, it's equal. 40-year-olds, 40 versus 41, it's equal. Until you get to 45 to 54, the proportion of people who say Spotify, Apple Music, Pandora, Amazon Music, that's radio, is equal to or greater than the number who say your actual streaming radio station is radio. The consequence of that can't be overstated. All right, I'll come back to implications for all this stuff a little later. I want to move on to platforms and devices. Now, platforms are where we go to get the audio content we like. Devices are the gadgets we listen to it on, okay? So platforms, that's the ecosystem, devices are the gadgets. Let's begin with platforms. These are the platforms we looked at. Radio stations, Pandora, Spotify, radio online, Apple Music, etc. The question we asked was this: do you often, sometimes, or almost never listen to ... right? Just looking at offens. The PDs predict that the audience would say, I often listen to a radio station, a regular radio station. And oh yes, sometimes I often listen to a radio station online. All that other stuff is relatively unimportant. The audience sees things a little differently. First of all, the audience is a lot less likely to say often to the radio station, and a lot more likely to say often to almost everything else, except the streaming radio station. Look at the Pandora difference. Look at the Spotify difference. Look at the Amazon Music difference. Look at the Apple Music difference. We are not in touch with the scope and depth of the consumption of these platforms by our own fans. The usage is very diverse, much more so than we might have expected. Again, looking at it demographically to get a further sense. Focus there. Spotify, 48 for 20-year-olds and 40 for 30-year-olds. That's huge. That's the number 2 platform for 20-year-olds after radio. And it's the number 3 platform for 30-year-olds. PDs need to know, understand, live on, leverage, and appreciate the platforms that their audience embraces to the same degree. That was platforms. Now let's look at devices, the gadgets. Regular radio, smartphone, laptop, smart speaker, satellite radio, tablet, right? Again, same question. What do you use often, sometimes, or almost never? We'll take a look at offens. A regular radio, the PDs predict the listeners will say, I use a regular radio often almost 100% of the time. A smartphone, very distant second. Laptop, smart speaker next, everything else lower. The audience sees things again differently. If you focus just on the red bars, you will quickly notice that a smartphone is virtually equal to a regular radio. The question here, audio, entertainment, or information. Do you often, sometimes, or almost never listen to audio, entertainment, or information on? And what they're saying is the smartphone is essentially equal to regular radio for them. Notice that desktop is lower, smart speaker is lower. Significantly lower when you can compare it to the smartphone. We put way too much emphasis in smart speakers and not enough emphasis in smartphones as an industry. Let's look at how it breaks out demographically again. Look at the smartphone data for 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds, and 40-year-olds. 73, 73, 67, number one for 20-year-olds, number one for 30-year-olds, almost number one for 40-year-olds. The number one thing they listen to most for audio, entertainment, and information. That doesn't mean smartphone is a competitor to radio. That means the smartphone is radio. Now, where does radio sit in the pecking order of things that matter to audiences in this day and age? Compared to 3 years ago, would you say that the radio today is a more important part of your life, less important, or neither more nor less than it was before? Now, when we wrote this question, we didn't expect that previous section to be what it was. We didn't expect everything to be radio and radio to be everything. So that'll give you a sense of how to interpret what you're about to see. Is it less important, more important? Well, the PDs say, the listeners are going to say it's less important than it used to be. The listeners see things differently. The listeners are more likely to say it's more important than it used to be. Well, why in the world would they say that? Well, guess what? When you think everything is radio, and you have more access to it than ever before, and there's more variety than ever before, more ways to consume it in more places to your liking, it becomes more important. This isn't a vote on the thing that comes from the towers. This is the vote on the thing that comes from the phones. Because listeners don't see the difference. They don't see the difference. And if they don't see the difference, we can't see the difference either. Otherwise, they move past us. Radio means more music, more platforms, more access. What's not to like? The same is going to be true here when we talk about the time they spend. Your time listening to radio in general. Compared to 3 years ago, is it more? Is it less? Is it the same? Well, not surprisingly, based on what you just saw, PDs say, oh, it's less. I get the Nielsen's. I've read the Nielsen's. I've had the calls with Nielsen. They tell me things on the QT. And it turns out it's less. And the audience says, I don't know what you're talking about. I have more access to more music in more places, and I call it radio than ever before. I spend more time with it now than ever. What's your problem? And you say, but it doesn't come from the tower. And they say, what's a tower? Now, again, we didn't know it was going to work out this way. We wanted to know for those people who said, I spend less time with radio, where does that time go? For that relatively smallish fraction of people who say they spend less time with radio, what are they spending more time with? Where'd that time go to? Are you spending it by doing more? This is, again, PD's predictions. Streaming video, streaming audio. That was the prediction. Everything else a lot lower. A little bit of social, a little bit of podcast maybe. The audience, again, sees things differently. Yes, streaming video, streaming audio are the number 1 and 2 answers. Look at number 3, watching something on TV. Guess what TV is? Anything you can see on TV. Not broadcast, not cable, not over the top. Whatever comes on that screen is television, folks. Just like whatever comes on that phone is radio. So yeah, and there's 540 some odd shows in production now. So yes, more on television than there used to be. More playing video games. We don't give fair credit to the impact video games has on the consumption of audio. Because video games is entertainment, and anything that's entertainment is about attention, and anything that's about attention is about your time, and anything that occupies your time takes it from somewhere. Social media? No. I'm not going to social media instead of radio. I'm not going to tune in instead of radio. I'm not listening to podcasts instead of radio. In case you haven't noticed, podcasts don't play music in general. We asked people who listen to both radio and what we described as digital service providers why they choose one over the other. We wanted to know what's driving the decision one way or another. You can see the question right there. Sometimes you may listen to radio, sometimes you'll choose a digital audio provider like Spotify or Pandora. When you listen to the radio, why do you choose it over a digital audio provider? In that moment, right now, what drives that decision right then and there? We talked here to the people who said they listened to both, right? That turned out to be 73% of the whole sample. 73% said they listened to both of those things on the left. So what drives your decision to listen to radio over the digital service providers? Here again is the program director prediction. Convenience, free, habit, community, or I should say local, DJs. Those are the 5, right? That's what you said. The audience sees things differently to a degree. In red, you see by far their number one answer is convenient and easy in the place I want to listen, which I'm going to guess is the car. Free is a secondary benefit, but it's much lower. Habit is fairly low, much lower than you or I would have expected, by the way. I'm looking for specific songs or artists is actually higher. What's going on there? You don't give them credit for playing the music they love, folks. Turns out we're doing a pretty good job there. Notice the deep difference in traffic, news, and weather. Turns out I can get that from a lot of places. Notice the deep difference with DJs, hosts, or shows, and the deep difference with community. Let me make a couple of points that are going to be controversial. Number one, DJs, hosts, or shows are a competitive advantage when they're great. They are an obstacle when they're not. The average listener evaluates what it means to be a DJ, host, or show not based on the best you've ever heard, but based on the average one they hear. And that is not great. And that doesn't lead them to radio. Ditto, local. Local is not an advantage unless it's a benefit. The fact that you're located down the street means absolutely nothing to me. The fact that you create a benefit in my life because of it may be very, very meaningful. But don't mistake the two. Your proximity is not the value proposition. It's just a fact of a map, okay? As for contests and prizes near the bottom there, why in the world would we think that would lead people to prefer radio over digital service providers? What listener has ever told you that? Okay, flip side. Why do you prefer digital service providers over radio? Same question, right? In the other direction. In this moment, why do you go to the DSPs over radio? Again, program director predictions. I can skip any songs I like. I'm looking for specific playlists. I'm looking for specific songs or artists. I don't want to wait for my favorite song. I want to get it right away. Those are all really logical answers. And none of them are the number one answer. None of them are the number one answer. And this is going to surprise you. The number one answer is the same as for radio. The number one answer is convenient and easy in the place I want to listen. And that place is on my phone. That's right. What better evidence do you need that a phone is the radio than when you see an answer to this question like that? What better evidence do you need? The number one answer. There's another point wrapped up in this too, and that is for a long time we've argued, well, you know, one of the great benefits of radio is it's habitual, it's ubiquitous, it's easy. All this other stuff, it's hard, it's complicated. Playlists, buttons, switches. What you're going to see in this research, and the fact of the matter is, it's not hard anymore. It's not hard anymore. It is the new habit. That's the number one answer. You'll see that the number two answers do line up with what Petey's predicted. Specific songs, specific playlists. Look at the number three answer. Part of my habit, where I go to first. If radio is to be preferred by things that are not technically radio, it has to be because of value you provide to those listeners. Value. Not habit, not ubiquity, not ease of use, and not longevity. Value. Okay. We asked people how important various things were in their country radio station. And this is the evaluation from, let's see, it was 1 to 5. So these are the 4s and 5s. These are the things that PDs predict listeners will say are important to them. Favorite songs, feeling good, favorite artists, positive, uplifted, whole family can relate to, can listen to. This is the first of 2 pages. Here's what the listeners said. Now, the things at the top track, right? The things at the top track. Look at the things where listeners rated them as more important than programmers predicted. Variety, music quantity, new songs, older songs, new artists. In other words, all things that relate to music. The volume of it, the quality of it, and the variety of it. Country radio stations are, last time I checked, primarily music stations. People primarily go to them for music. Thus, what people are saying is, don't discount the importance of those music attributes in determining what's important to us conceptually. Here's the second page. Again, predictions by the PDs. Companionship, in touch with what's going on around town, entertaining morning show, and local community. You can guess what's going to happen. The biggest differences are in companionship, what's going on around town, entertaining morning show, and local community, none of which have to do with music. So remember that as country stations, we're music stations first, for music fans first. Balance. We asked people to think about the mix on their favorite country music station and use a scale where on one end we said, we want you to play less of this, and on the other end we say, we want you to play more of this. And we were looking for the balance. Do you want us to play more of it, less of it? So you're going to see a bar that goes to the right means I want to hear more. A bar that goes to the left means I want to hear less. Would you like your local country music station to play more or less of this? PDs predict in blue. They predict the audience is going to say more of my favorite songs. Hope they're right about that. Country songs from today and the past couple years, from the 90s. New country songs from established artists. Country songs from 2000 to 2010. All PDs say they're going to say they want more. By the way, people generally say they want more of things they like and want less of things they don't like. PDs say they're right on the border with new country songs from brand new artists. There's split opinion among PDs there. What PDs are sure of is that people are going to say they want fewer cross-format collaborations or less cross-format collaborations. That's that bottom blue line to the left. And of course, the audience says wrong. The audience says cross-format collaborations are fine, conceptually. Now, I know what you may be thinking. I'm not privy to your music research. Maybe you're testing this stuff and it's not testing. Who the heck knows? Maybe you're not trying to take enough risks with it because you're afraid of it because it's cross-format. Who the heck knows? Here's what I do know. If you test a song that doesn't sound like it fits on your station because it's got a pop element, that's one score. If you test a song that doesn't sound like it fits on your station and you tell people that, oh, Blake Shelton's in that song, that's another score. The presence of country artists legitimizes the presence of other artists, right? It's like when your friend recommends a movie to you and you go on that recommendation. That's the power that you have. The country artists can legitimize non-country artists if they are in a cross-format collaboration. And that is why it tests so well there, because all of those have country artists in them. Gender balance preference. Uh-oh. Now, we asked a very specific question here, and I'll be happy to opine on the larger issue later if you want. But the very specific question was, when it comes to the mix of songs from male and female artists on your favorite country station, which of these statements best describes your opinion? I either prefer a mix that has more guys, or I prefer a mix that has more girls, or I prefer a mix that has a good balance of songs by male and female artists, whatever that means to you. Or I don't care what the mix of male and female artists is. It turns out I listen for the hits. That last part I added, but that's what they mean. The PDs essentially predict that the audience will say, I either want a good balance of male and female, or I don't really care. Just play great songs. And guess what? In general, the audience agrees. The audience sees that the same way. Give me a good balance of male and female artists, and I don't care what the balance is. Just play good songs. There is a tendency for them to say, yep, I want a little more male music. I want a little more female music in equal measures. But in general, they want a mix or they don't care. I would listen more to my country station if. Okay, now these questions are always tough, right? Because you're asking people to predict future behavior, which is very specious. But it's nice to be able to compare within without making blanket conclusions that, you know, a certain change would necessarily result in increased listening. I would listen more. If my country station played, this is again PD predictions, more of my favorite music, get to my favorite songs faster, let me skip songs, more entertaining personalities. Those are the big four that PDs predict. The audience sees things, again, a little bit differently. In no case in the top four is the audience score as high as the PD score. It's much more spread out, and many more of the items have to do with music. Once again, look at the difference with played the music without talking. Look at the difference with played more brand new music. Look at the difference with had more opportunities to hear my favorite artists talk about their music. All significantly higher for listeners than for PD predictions. And again, entertaining on-air personalities is lower for the reason I mentioned earlier. We actually looked at the amount of commercials on country radio. We asked people the straw man question, right? Compared to 3 years ago, is your favorite country music station playing more or less or the same amount of commercials, right? This is fun. Here's what the PDs said. On the left is a lot less, and on the right is don't know. Everything else is in the middle. So green is more, orange is a lot more. Here's what the listeners thought. Guess what, guys? You got one. Good. Whew. We're 3/4 of the way through. Yeah, interestingly, the PDs think the problem's worse than the audience does. And why not? Because guess what? Audience can route around this problem. Every time they flip a station, they're routing around this problem. Every time they go to Spotify or Pandora, they're routing around this problem. The more they can route around this problem, the more it ceases to exist, especially if everything is radio, and radio is everything. Now, one more question about commercials. When a commercial comes on your favorite country music station, do you usually consider it useful information and irritation, or both? It's a fair question. Well, PDs have their opinions. They say, well, no one's going to call it useful, the PDs say. And the audience says, oh, it's not as bad as all that. Yeah, it's useful. It's also irritating. It's both useful and irritating. It's irre-useful and usefitating. But at least they actually give the commercials more credit than we do. Don't tell the sellers, okay? Don't tell them. Hopefully they're not here. Now, I'd like to ask a question about personalities that gets to the value of the personalities. And the question I ask is kind of a subtle one. It's not, do you like or not like what they're doing, but would you listen closer, or would you tune away, or do you pay no attention if they're doing something? Does it engage you, does it reject you, or does it bounce off you? When you hear the personalities on your favorite country music station talk about ... Again, PD predictions. I would listen closer to this if they talked about the weather information, things that make you laugh, stories that you relate to, things to do around town, local concert information, things you can win. Everybody thinks things you can win, my goodness. The music and the artists, not so much the news headlines. Here's what the audience says. First of all, virtually all the scores are lower, and news headlines, even though it's higher for the audience, is still in the middle. At the top is weather information, things that make you laugh, traffic information, music and artists. Sounds like the underpinnings of the radio station to me. At the bottom, things you can win. Local concert information. I can get that from a lot of places now. Things to do around town. Again, I've got a lot of resources for that now. Oops. We asked some other questions to wrap this up. What listeners pay attention to when they pick their favorite new country artists? A lot of new artists out there. Which of the following things do you most pay attention to when you pick your favorite new country artist, right? What are the keys to picking the next big thing? The PDs say they have at least one song you love. Distant second, connection on social media, they're down-to-earth people, somebody told you about them. Those are the next three. Here's what the audience says. Well, they agree with you on the first one. Yeah, you got to have a song they love. It has to begin there. Look at their number two. It's kind of a three-way tie between down-to-earth people, social media connection, someone you don't know about. Actually, a four-way tie, maybe a five-way tie. Great style, and they look great. The one area that the audience is higher than PDs on is they look great. Don't discount how good they look. I can't believe I'm saying this in a presentation. Okay, this research result, good-looking people are more attractive to more people, okay? There you go. Research investment verified right there. Had to wait until I was this old to figure that out. Actually, I figured it out in high school. Okay, So where do you go to keep up on your favorite new country artists, right? Which of the following places do you go to keep up on what's new with your favorite country music artists? Platforms, Instagram. These are, again, the PD predictions, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, in fourth place, tied with websites. Listeners, again, see things rather differently. YouTube, number 1. Music first, right? Music first. Facebook, number 2. Instagram, number 3. Twitter and websites aren't even on the list for them. Why would I go there? Why would I go there? In general, PDs have too high an opinion of both Twitter and websites in this format. In radio in general, that's true, for music radio in general. Demographically, I wanted to show you this just so you can see, for example, look at 20-year-olds, look at Snapchat. Out of nowhere. Illustrates how quick these things move. YouTube is all the way across. Instagram skewing young, which is what it does. But Twitter, websites, nowhere. Now, how do you connect with your favorite music station? Not artist, but station this time. Which of the following ways have you personally used to connect with your favorite country music station, if any? Here again are program director predictions. Facebook, numero uno. Websites and Instagram, essentially tied for second, right? Here's what listeners say. Number 1, Facebook tied with YouTube. Well, wait a minute, why YouTube? Well, because listeners connect with their favorite station through the music, not through the station. It's not about you, it's about the music on you. YouTube, Facebook first, Instagram second, Twitter irrelevant, websites. Look how low websites are. It really causes us to have to rethink our emphasis on how we apportion our emphasis on social media. I know websites are obviously monetized, but don't confuse the monetization objective with the listener service objective. They're not the same. So I want to wrap this up with some to-dos, some things to be mindful of as we go forward, some lessons to take away from this. You'll be able to refer to this after. They'll share all these with you. So starting with smartphones. The findings, smartphones are becoming the new radio. The smartphone, not the smart speaker, is the center of the universe. It's fine to have attention and focus on smart speaker, but not at the expense of the thing that everyone actually owns and uses. To do. What experiences can you create on or through the smartphone which add value to the lives of your consumers? And yes, I said consumers, not listeners. Because when you're dealing with smartphones, you're dealing with people who have a variety of needs that don't necessarily involve listening. In fact, one of the objectives for radio going forward, the future of radio is beyond radio. The future of radio is off the tower. Get beyond simulcasting your over-the-air content or pushing people back to your radio station. That's a very nice Nielsen game for a very nice Nielsen world. And last time I checked, not on the ranker, Sirius XM, Pandora, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Prime. Should we keep on going? Video games, Netflix, not on your ranker. Many of them ad-supported. Radio, quote unquote. Radio is no longer the content that comes from the local tower or streams from the local station. Now it represents whatever platform can give me the music I want, the way I want it, whenever I want it, wherever I want it. In other words, I'm in control, you're not in control. You better find me where I am and give me what I want when I'm there. That's your opportunity. That's your good news. So, to the degree that the radio business is about selling ads against people who listen to radio stations that are measured by Nielsen, we got to get beyond that. Get into the business of mobile phone experiences and must-join experiences in the real world. The value of being local, by the way, is that you can do things in the real world. If you do, the experience business. You are no longer a radio station. You're a publisher, an event planner, an experience maker, a dream fulfiller, a problem solver. Not just a radio station with a digital adjunct. Convenient and easy. The two things we used to count on is forever advantages of radio. Not anymore. Smartphones are no longer work. They are not only the new radio, they are the new habit. What's the to-do? Well, we can't assume we're going to be around forever just because we've always been around. No more coasting on generations of momentum, habit, and convenience. We have to plan out a matter to today and tomorrow's audiences on the platforms they prefer, using the tools they favor, with the features and functions they demand. If that sounds like a tall order, welcome to Radio in 2020, folks. Our competition. Any platform, medium, or experience that rewards content with attention. Not just other audio platforms, certainly not other radio stations, and definitely not the things that are in the ranker. Your competition is whatever competes for my attention, whether or not it's audio-based. So those are your competitors. That new show on Netflix, that's your competitor. What are you creating to capture my attention in the real world or on the platforms I prefer? Country fans are embracing a much more diverse selection of platforms than program directors realize. They should be diverse, not dispersed. I could say dispersed selection. So it's important for you as the executives behind the wheel to get familiar with all these platforms that matter most to your audience and to be there their way. However, they want you there. Personalities. Entertaining personalities do not score as well as the simple wish for more music without interruptions. Look, yes, personalities can differentiate your content from simple playlists, but only if they're really great, right? Otherwise, they're obstacles, they're speed bumps, they're in the way, they're interruptions. That's why we spend so much time trying to abbreviate personalities down to 8 seconds. That's not to increase their value, that's to reduce their damage. Wouldn't it be better to have the best personalities you can, ones that actually drew people in? Are we nurturing that? Are we growing that? Are we developing that? Do we care about that? Are we paying for that? Less than great talent would never be a compelling reason to listen. Local. Being local is not a strong reason to listen. There, I said it. Think less about local. Think more about value. The value of you being local is what? And don't just make up a list. Make up a list that matters to me. What are you doing online, on the air, and in the real world that is valuable to your consumers? Why does your address matter to me? You better have an answer to that. What music fans want. More music, more variety, more new and old, fewer interruptions. In other words, more of what they come to you for. So how do you give them that? Take responsible risks and test them before assuming what your consumers will or won't accept. And by the way, when I say test, I don't necessarily mean research. I just mean try stuff. See how it feels. See what response you get. See what the social does. See what the people in the halls say. Try stuff. Don't be afraid to fail. If Netflix had been afraid to fail, we'd all still be getting DVDs in the mail today. And my next bullet, there would be no such thing as all Christmas stations, because that's the nuttiest idea anybody ever had, let's be honest. Wait, you want me to switch format for the entire month of December and November? Okay, that's ridiculous. Collaborations, cross-format collaborations in pop country. Country fans are interested in both conceptually, right? Give them a chance. Showcase and spotlight them. If you educate them about what you're doing, they will perceive it differently than if you simply drop it in, okay? Yes, this is Justin Bieber. Get ready, everybody, but look who's with him. Recognize that audiences change and so must format strategies. Remember that a country artist legitimizes a non-country artist. None of this means that the songs will end up working. Who knows? But as you well know from years of experience, that which you don't try, no one will ever appreciate. Twitter and websites. PDs think Twitter and websites are more important to country fans than they are. Instead, focus elsewhere. YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Be where your consumers are and give them what they go to these platforms for. And with that, thank you. Now, I know we have a few minutes left, and they tell me if you, I guess you got to go to the microphone, find the microphone if you have any questions. Is that the routine? Okay.
Hello? Hi. I'm getting a few emails from people in the room who want to know if they can get this deck or key findings. So we are going to post key findings on the app today, if not today, tomorrow, and we're going to post it on our website Monday.
Okay.
So thank you, Mark. Fantastic. And I think we do have some questions that came through on the app. I'll give it to Billy McKim for that.
So Mark, the first question that we have is, did you compare the results by market size? And what about PPM versus diary markets?
Well, it's kind of the same question, right? Because larger markets are PPM markets and smaller markets are diary markets. So the answer is yes, the data, and how much of the data is going to be shared with you is up to the guys at CRS. The data does contain breakouts by market size. I didn't do a split big market versus small market. I did a split of kind of largest and medium. I did several splits. I didn't specifically look to evaluate the data that way, primarily because I thought it just complicates the presentation in an event like this. So the data is available to you, and you're welcome to carve it out any way you want. I understand where the question is coming from. The question is coming from the expectation that smaller markets might be less tuned into the trends than larger markets. And all I can say to you is, you're seeing your future in the larger markets. It's only a question of time.
So Mark, the next question is, do PPMs detect audio via smartphones? If more people are using their smartphones as radio, how does this affect the way ratings are measured? Should adjustments be made?
I'm not an expert on how PPM works with cell phones. I, of course, know, like you guys do, that it's about the audio signal, so that anything you're listening to on earbuds, unless you have all kinds of gadgetry attached, is not likely to get measured. Other people can answer the Nielsen technicals of that question. What I can tell you is two things. Number one is, yes, of course, changes should be made. If you're not measuring the audio the way the consumers are consuming the audio, then you are, by definition, doing a shitty job. Number one. Number two, let's recognize that measurement alone is not the answer, since audio alone is not the answer, since what's on the ranker alone is not the answer, because no matter what you do to the ratings methodology, there's no incentive for Spotify to be in your ranker, there's no incentive for YouTube to be in your ranker. All of these other things that consume attention and take it away from what's in that ranker will continue to exist no matter what happens with measurement methodology. So I say to you, the best path is, yes, do what you can to fix measurement methodology, but recognize that the future is a future beyond that measurement.
So Mark, this may have been similar to what you answered before, but are you also going to make the comparisons among regions?
All of that's in the data. All of that's in the data, and again, what's going to be made available to you is up to CRS. But I discourage you from breaking this down too narrowly, because then instead of coming away with broad understandings, you get lost in the minutia of data points, and I don't want you to do that. That's why I presented this way.
Okay, Mark, should websites and Twitter aren't important, so should we abandon, or is there still an expectation that we should have presence there?
Well, there may be an expectation for you, or for your management, or for your boss. Be on Twitter, yes sir. Maybe that's the expectation. My belief is that you should begin with a strategy, not with a platform. What are you trying to do? Why are you trying to do it? What are the platforms our listeners, our consumers are on? How can we leverage those platforms in the pursuit of goals that drive forward our objectives and increase the engagement, the real-world engagement we have with these audiences?
Appreciate the opportunity to steal the microphone for a second. Mark, great presentation. I wanted to go back to your comments about radio and specifically the use of the term radio. Inside the business, there has been a movement toward abandoning that word altogether, that it's some kind of really bad five-letter word in favor of the word audio. However, what I saw from your deck is that radio, as you said, radio is everything, everything is radio. Are we making a mistake by abandoning the use of the word radio?
Well, I think if you abandon it, it'll take 20 years for your audience to do likewise. So it's kind of a moot point. Sirius has abandoned it, I noticed. Now everything's a connected device. And if they were to see this, maybe they're here, they might maybe reconsider that, because connected device does not roll off the tongue. Radio rolls, but radio is synonymous with audio. And I think that where you might get some pushback is with maybe advertisers who are incentivized to look at radio as a category in a certain way, in a very traditional way. But that's not the way the audiences look at it. So if you want to speak audience, don't be afraid to speak radio.
Okay, Mark, the next question is there an appetite for country stations to go all Christmas like the AC stations, or is that outside of the expectation?
Well, it was outside the expectation for the AC stations to do it. That's the thing. When you always look to see what fits with your past expectation, you will never change. You will never evolve. You will never grow. You will always wither. So at a certain point, you need to take some chances. Now, let's remember that these chances happened gradually, right? I don't remember exactly how Christmas started, but I'm going to guess, somebody can correct me, that it started like for a few days. Is that right? I know it started on one station, right? But it didn't start for a full month, right? Wasn't it like a few days? So all these things start slowly. Sorry? Oh, I thought somebody knew. So all these things start slowly. They don't begin with 20% of your airtime turned over to a format different from the one you're in. Could country do it? Yes, but that's more of a competitive question. That's more a question of who else is doing it in my market, and is it an opportunity to do it differently? Is it an opportunity to be the third one in, for goodness sake? But boy, if there's no first one in, I'd do that for sure. Questions? Anything else? You have 7 minutes and 59 seconds.
Hi, Mark. Great job.
Thank you, sir.
Could there be a difference in PPM meter holders or diary keepers in terms of contesting? In other words, people more inclined to keep the meters and the diaries, to be more inclined to play contests than may have been indicated by the research.
So, in other words, because PPM is a virtual contest factory now, thanks to Nielsen, that it's pretty much the whole process is a process of contest stoking. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yes.
To play the Nielsen game.
Yeah, since Nielsen now is like virtually, contests are all Nielsen can do, contests and bribery are all Nielsen can do to get people to keep these meters, which, by the way, should tell you something. So yes, theoretically, if you play that game, you dovetail into the same behavior. Yes, that's correct. But it's still only the ratings game.
Right.
It's still only the ratings game. And the ratings game only gets you so far in a world where people are listening less to you today, not because of the ratings game, but because of all these other things on the menu. All of them are paying more attention, no attention to ratings, more attention to value, more attention to consumption, more attention to listener engagement.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joel. Anything else? 6 minutes, 28 seconds. Okay, the question is, what about Pandora? Can you be more specific? I don't know I haven't watched the metrics on Pandora lately. Last time I saw, they were kind of leveling. And I think that's why you haven't heard about it more, because we're a world that focuses on growth and shrinkage. Steady, we don't pay attention to. Growth and shrinkage are all we look at. That which is getting smaller, we pay attention to. That which is getting larger, we pay attention to. And Spotify's growing. So I think, and of course, Apple Music and Amazon Music likewise. So it's not that it's not relevant. It's very relevant. It just isn't growing. And that's why you're not hearing about it more.
Well, thank you very much for coming to the research presentation, Mark. Thank you. And
Thank you,
we'll
guys.
see y'all at UMG.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for being here.